September webinar, Therapeutic Gardening for the Planet, Earth-Friendly Projects for Human and Ecosystem Well-Being. This webinar is hosted by the Florida Horticulture for Health Network, and I will let you all know that we use several platforms to share information and education. They're listed on this first slide. Katie, if you don't mind making sure you're on that one. And if you want to, please consider subscribing to the network via the website. We send out monthly e-blasts to subscribers with upcoming webinars, including our next one in November, recent YouTube videos, horticulture information, and other interesting events related to how horticulture can positively impact health. My name is Sarah Sterling, and I have the great fortune of collaborating with a lot of the other folks on this webinar as an advisory member with the Florida Horticulture for Health Network. Please note that this webinar will be recorded. We will take questions in the chat. Those will be sent directly to the different hosts for this webinar, but we're going to hold all those questions until the end. So when Katie's presenting, if you have anything that you'd like to ask her, just feel free to throw that in the chat right in that moment. I'm really excited to introduce Catherine Katie Grimes, who's an education and volunteer manager at Wonder Gardens in Bonita Springs, Florida. She's been connecting children and adults to the natural world through hands-on, hearts-on, and minds-on experiences for more than 20 years. Katie holds a Master of Arts in Teaching degree from Trinity University with a concentration in special education, is a registered horticultural therapist, and is a member of the advisory committee for the Florida Horticulture for Health Network. As a certified interpretive guide, she incorporates tailored walks, tours, and talks into her work with clients, sharing easy ways that small daily lifestyle changes can make big impacts on conservation. We're thrilled to have Katie share this important work with us today. So welcome, Katie, and I'm going to let you take over.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, well, we're just going to get started down here with our first screen. We're going to be talking today about therapeutic activities that we can do in the garden for human and ecosystem well-being, and really talk about this interrelationship that happens between humans, animals, and the environment, and why that interrelationship is so important for not only for people, but also for the health of the ecosystem, and some activities that we can do in order to help capitalize on all of that. My name is Katie Grimes, as Sarah mentioned. I am currently at the Wonder Gardens in Bonita Springs, Florida, and that has put me in a place where we have both animals and plants and people all kind of working together in the same place. It's a small, historic botanical garden, and we also provide homes for long-term nurturing homes for animals, many of whom are rescued and rehabilitated. So as a gardener and as a educator, this has been a lot of fun to see where these intersections take place between the animals, the people, and the plants together, as we talk about like environmental education and how to affect change both for people and the planet. So when I first started working with animals, that was a little bit different for me because I had previously been solely focused on that connection between humans and the environment and gardening. And I was introduced to a whole new concept at that time, and that was, it was whole new to me, and that was the idea of conservation psychology. And conservation psychology is a little bit different from where I was coming from, which was more about eco-psychology, you know, what's the relationship between humans and the environment. And then being in the zoo world, we started talking about conservation psychology and how the human psyche works. What's the motivational factors that can affect change for the environment and for animals and for the planet. And so I started working with some thoughts from Louise Chawla, who has written on conservation psychology. mentored also by Jay Rice, who is in clinical practice, and by some other people, Marty Copeland and Ben Jones, who I was working with at the Dallas Zoo, and trying to describe what it takes to help someone develop that environmental identity. So when we talk about an environmental identity, we want to talk about how the person associates themselves as a part of nature. So not just in communion with nature, not just interacting with nature, but actually is a part of nature. And the little picture that I have in the middle there of the child might represent a child, or it might also represent an adult who is going through an experience of development as they are working towards their environmental identity. The thought process here is that the wheel can move like a cycle or like a web, either way. But the elements that we're looking at to develop this environmental identity would be connection with nature. So we're actually physically present with nature, with animals, with plants, with water, with the environment. And so we're taking advantage of those sensory opportunities with that. Comprehension is where we're learning a little bit more about it. We're studying it, we're asking questions, we're developing inquiry, we're looking for answers, we're problem solving. Care is where we are affecting change. So we're, whether we're caring for plants or whether we're caring for animals or whether we're caring for the environment in another way, it's a way that we can have self-efficacy, and that is developing our emotional and social states. And then we have this theory of reciprocity that happens when we have this connection, when we have this care, when we have this comprehension of nature, and we're acting on nature for the sake of nature as well as for the sake of one another. That is helping us to develop a bigger consciousness. That can also be described as a spirituality that goes beyond religion. It goes beyond culture. When we talk about that consciousness, that spirituality, it's really talking about harmony. It's talking about oneness and wholeness. And that when we get to that stage, it's where we really see ourselves as being a part of nature, where we truly, truly understand the interdependentness between people and the environment and animals and plants, and how we have agency and the empathy and all of the skills that we need to be able to affect change. So this kind of wheel of this graphic design helps me in planning activities when working with people. My role I see is one of helping people to, or facilitating that development of the environmental identity. This adult in the picture with the child is extremely important because all of this happens through mentorship. It's through sharing our own identity with others and mentoring people through that process. I'm trying to advance my screen here. There we go. So as a horticultural therapist, when I'm working with people, whether those people are in need of therapeutic interaction or whether it's typical interaction that's also going to be therapeutic for them, either way, I'm going to always keep these therapeutic goals in my mind and help to facilitate these roles with the participants in these programs. And so these kind of fall into these bigger categories of connection, comprehension, care, and consciousness and broken down there into goals of physical wellness, of sensory activity or sensory engagement, different comprehension or cognitive goals, social and psychological, emotional goals. And then I don't personally work a lot with the spiritual or consciousness goals. My understanding is more that that's happening internally with the person as they are in communion and developing that community with the care and the connection and the cognitive development that is going on. So that I consider more internal. But all of these other goals are ones that, as we're doing these activities, I will specifically help to engage in with the people in such a way that we're addressing these different goals. I wanted to share a few of the places that were really instrumental in, helping to develop these activities. The places where I learned, our Savior Community Garden was really instrumental to me in understanding sustainable gardening. It's an edible garden, an urban farm in a desert, a food desert. And this serves food banks, and it serves, people in a community where self-efficacy is really important in terms of, them being able to take care of themselves from the standpoint of food and nutrition. And Becky Smith was my mentor there and shared some beautiful ideas on how to grow things sustainably on a almost zero budget. She is amazing. At Vogel Alcove in Dallas, we served children who were experiencing homelessness. And these children also, of course, along with the homelessness comes a great deal of trauma. And that trauma could be anything from abuse to having seen very difficult situations on the street, to, just the loss of everything that comes along with that. And so I was in the position of being able to develop some therapeutic gardens for them and with them, and working with the children and the teachers in that setting. Deborah Edwards is a horticultural therapist who was mentoring me during that time as an intern. And this pollinator garden was one of three. There was a pollinator garden, there was a sensory garden, and there was a vegetable garden. However, it's really the pollinator garden I wanted to focus on today, since we're really talking about, the ways of bringing wildlife into our settings. At the Dallas Zoo, I had the opportunity to develop a nature preschool for young children. And one of the wild places that we got to interact with in that space was a monarch way station, a restoration habitat that was planted by Ben Jones, who was in charge of conservation. And he worked with a lot of volunteers in the community to be able to do that. And we were in a position with the young children to be able to engage in this space that had been created and watch the cycles of life happen here and see essentially conservation in action. And then currently I am at Wonder Gardens in Bonita Springs, where I'm the education and volunteer manager. And we are, like I said, a very small historic botanic garden. We have both native plantings, as we can see on the right in the filter marsh, and also non-native tropical plantings like we're seeing in the Orchid Plaza on the left. And this really small environment is giving me an opportunity to work with people of all different ages and find ways that we can demonstrate care to some of the animals in our human care at the location, as well as demonstrate ecological topics of conservation in these settings. Probably many of you who are in this webinar are already very familiar with some of these gardening techniques for attracting wildlife, but I thought I'd go ahead and mention it just because I think it's vital to everything else that we're doing here. So if you're working to attract wildlife in your gardens, you want to make sure that there's a food source for animals, and that might be nectar flowers or seeds or nuts or berries, a water source of some sort, places for animals to raise their young, like host plants for butterflies or nesting boxes for birds or bats, bee houses, things like that. And to provide cover for them, like branches and leaf litter and dead trees or logs. It's kind of funny as we start working with gardening to attract wildlife, and working with some of the populations that I have, like these young children. We might be growing food, but whereas many gardeners might be working to remove those pests from the garden, we're rejoicing in all of those caterpillars that come to eat the food, because we love to see that wildlife too, and explore those bugs. So there are some very some strategies that you want to intentionally place into these gardens in order to have this wildlife experience. So the projects I wanted to share with you today fall into 5 different categories. Envisioning a beautiful future, and that's going to really deal with life cycles and journaling. Zooming in for regulation is going to deal with macro photography and macro experiences. Safekeeping is going to be dealing with habitat building and terrariums. Flourish and Nourish is actually short for the whole program that I'm running currently, which is called Flourish, Nourish, Cultivate, Connect, which is about feeding and enriching our animal friends. And rewilding and restoring. I'm going to be taking a look at some of the big projects that where you see conservation in action, and how we can be a part of that through citizen science. So this phrase, envision a beautiful future, I don't know if Richard Louv said this specifically, or if I was just what he was talking about. He was talking during a conference at the Children in Nature Network about, envisioning a beautiful world, envisioning a place where native plants would be in people's yards, where the wildlife corridors would run from one end of the country to the other, and that it would be fully integrated in a space so that wildlife and people and plants could all come together. I kind of latched on to this thought of envisioning a beautiful future because I was working with the children in trauma during this time, and this was really important that we start thinking about resiliency. We start helping them to relieve anxiety, developing hope and a thought of interdependence within them, or helping them to develop that own sense. So this thought has spurred forward in a few different ways and a few different activities. One is welcoming pollinators to our gardens, seed saving and starting. A lot of this, again, goes back to life cycles. And what we're doing here is looking at the life cycles at different stages, and we're imagining, or we're envisioning, the next life cycle to come. The story I really love to tell here is when working at Vogel Alcove with these young children experiencing homelessness, I worked with a boy who had his father was in prison, and he was waiting for that time when his father would be reunited with him. And this was a time in the garden where we were seeing a lot of dormancy. There was some ice sometimes on the ground. A lot of the plants were brown and dead, and well, not dead, dormant. And we would go back to these spaces, and he would be like, but where is all the flowers? Where is all the beauty? And, I started realizing this, this is a really difficult time in his life too. He's not seen a lot of beauty in his own life right now, and things are feeling very dark. And so we started working with this idea of hope and envisioning what's to come and envisioning the future. And so we started deeply noticing things like the flowers preparing to bud, or the little rosettes that where maybe we weren't seeing anything happening yet, but we knew that it would be happening soon. And so eventually, spring did come, and we saw the little pansies that we had planted start to perk up and flower. And this little guy who was just 3 or 4 made this connection on his own, that he had made it to a more beautiful time in his life, and it did give him a lot of hope for the future. So I know that this is applicable to all age groups, and just makes a huge difference. So in seed saving and seed starting, I always like to use compostable pots rather than plastic pots, because then we can also talk about reducing plastic in our lives and making a difference that way. We're going to walk through the area and look at the different stages of plants, finding the ones that are dormant, finding the ones that are starting to bloom out a little bit, and we're going to start envisioning what it's going to look like when the rest of them are in bloom. So at this dormant stage, which is fall, which is right now, is a great time to do this. We're collecting the seed heads of, I often look for perennials, because some of these perennials can be planted now. They'll start and have their little rosette, and then that rosette will winter over and begin to grow in the spring. So where I was in Texas, black-eyed Susan and purple coneflower, perennial sunflowers, they all worked really well for this. Something to keep in mind is the purple coneflowers specifically are very spiky to work with, but we would take those dead seed heads off. We would leave the stems, because the stems are going to be a place for mason bees to overwinter. And we would start pulling apart those coneflowers and getting the seeds out of them. And then working with young children, it was important that we do the next step right then. I think sometimes we do seed saving and then we wait and keep those seeds until the next season. But working with young children, they needed to be able to see what was happening right in front of our eyes. So we would go ahead and plant them right then in, seed starting soil or coconut fiber, mist them a little bit with spray bottles, and then wait for them to germinate. And when they were germinated, then we would plant them into the environment where the rest of these plants were growing, and start envisioning what's going to happen next. And one of the ways that we could envision this progress were through pollinator welcome signs. And this is a fun activity. This one shows actually butterflies that are decorated using, starting out with a milk jug. So you're cutting the milk jug into the shape of different butterflies that you might see on these host plants or on these nectar plants when they come to maturity. Working with young children, we didn't do anything quite so specific as the actual butterflies. We just worked with, like, what would you imagine to come here? Can you imagine the bugs that would come? And they would do whatever design they wanted to do. But with older children or with adults, you might actually have images of the actual butterflies that will be there, or the actual caterpillars that will be at those plants. Oil pastels are great for young children, because you might not want to be working with acrylic paint or permanent markers with them, but with older children or with adults, permanent markers or acrylic paint are great for decorating your signs. And then covering those with outdoor Mod Podge will help them stay vibrant through the season. So we're going to take this little sign, we're going to put it on something sustainable like bamboo or a wooden stake. And then we're going to plant that stake right at the base of the rosette of a plant that's going to come to maturity during the spring. And then we're going to check back on it on a regular basis. And every time we check back, we might make a little mark on the stake to say, this is how far it's grown, what's coming next. And then we would do it again, this is how far it's grown. And working with that hope for the future and, imagining what's coming at the next stage. One of the things that you're probably already doing in your program a lot if you're working with people in the garden in different ways might be journals. And I like to work specifically with life cycle journals. So again, when we're envisioning the future, we're not just journaling about what we're seeing in the present time, but we're journaling about what we envision to come in the future. And again, even young children can grasp this concept. I try to use less paper in my programs whenever we can so that we can talk about reducing and reusing and recycling. So I love the use of chalkboards, especially for young children, so you don't have paper flying everywhere because it's going to come out of those little clipboards, you can bet. But chalkboards work really well. And so as children are envisioning what it's going to look, what this dormant plant is going to look like, we can talk about it. We can talk about the growth that's going to come. We can talk about, how your life is going to change during that time. I love to use I wonder questions. So we talk about, I wonder what this plant is going to look like in the future. I wonder what you're going to be feeling like in the spring. I wonder what you're going, how you're going to change in the spring. And these open-ended I wonder questions allow them to respond or not respond based on, how they're feeling and if they're ready to do that or not. With older kids, it also or adults, using anything from cardboard boxes, pallets, sheets, tarps. We do these murals in lots of different places on lots of different media. And again, chalk works well, paint or oil pastels. When working with chalk, of course, it's going to be short term. And sometimes that's exactly what we need is just short term. We're just there in the moment. What is it like right here in the moment? And let's move on from that. It doesn't always have to be a permanent installation because we're going to do it again next week. These are some of the resources I've used to teach myself how to do nature journaling. I love Claire Walker Leslie, her book, Keeping a Nature Journal. I think this is the third edition cover here. It's very artistic, but it also gives you lots of different strategies throughout the year. It gives you lots of strategies to develop your own style. And it's not so much focused on does it have to look exactly like what you're seeing. It comes from an artistic perspective, which gives a lot of latitude and a lot of freedom for people to express themselves. I've used this is John Muir Law's program in journaling, and I love this one for our teens that we've worked with because it does include a lot of science-based learning and a lot of science focus. And this is a wonderful curriculum that is free. He has a whole series of how-to videos on YouTube. And there's also a free curriculum that is available along with sketches and things like that. It's a great way to guide your processes in working with journaling. So moving on to zooming in for regulation. And so when we talk about regulation, a lot of what we're talking about there is a, an individual who is regulating their emotional state, or who is, and that is also combining a lot of the time with regulating their physical state. And what we want to see in a person who's regulated is that, they're able to kind of navigate those ups and downs in life, the excitability, the fear, um, and regulate those, or extreme happiness, regulate those emotions so that they're able to uh, bring themselves down from an extreme response, or bring themselves up when they need to come up from a low response, to maintain, mental clarity, and the ability to interact with others as needed. So one of the activities that I have found to really help with regulation is going to a macro level. And that this could be with photography or video, but it also could just be with our own eyes. When we focus very deeply on things, it improves our attention span, and it helps to regulate a lot of that extra energy that's around us. So I wanted to share a few strategies related to that. Focusing here, some of the therapeutic goals that we're working on here would be curiosity, wonder, developing attention, and seeing the interdependence. So when we go to a macro level, the picture on the right is showing us a bromeliad, and I love these bromeliads. I do this in the morning as I walk around the garden, and just do a deep dive into that flower. And we're not only seeing, the little flowers that are coming up, but we're seeing the water that collected overnight, and the little mosquito larva that has grown in there, and knowing that this bromeliad, is um, making use of all of these resources that are coming to it. The water is helping it to grow, and these mosquito larvae, the ones that don't make it, will feed the bromeliad. The ones that do make it might feed other animals that come to it. We have even seen birds drinking out of these cups in the garden. And so it's just like this whole little microcosm in a very, very small space. And zooming down on that, we're going to see all these little insects. We're going to notice the pollen sacs on the bees' legs, and all these things that we are not noticing on a daily basis. I want to thank Jessica Boyson, who taught with me uh, at Wild Earth Preschool, for bringing macro photography to the children, because it really opened up a whole new world to them in a very deep way. Let's see. Go ahead and move on, I think, from there. Um, some of our favorite tools for zooming in would be this private eye jeweler's loop. There are other jeweler's loops also. The brand Private Eye does sell them in sets of 18 on Acorn Naturalist. And that's great for if you're working with a school group or anything like that. I love the digital microscopes that give us a screen. I use these at the garden. We just pop them out and turn them on, and we put whatever we can find under them to take a closer deep dive look. And then using a macro lens adapter on a phone camera is a really fun way to take video and slow motion photography and things like that, that really allow us to focus deeply on the interdependence of life. So I wanted to show this video real quick about how this all affects regulation. What you're going to see in the video, it's a pretty short video here, is a group of children who have gathered together with their teacher in a field that has dandelions, and they're noticing bees. And what I want you to watch is this person here, this young child here in the background, who throughout the whole time is not only maintaining her own regulation, but she's helping her fellow student manage his fear of the bees by helping him to take a deep dive and look at that bee more closely.
After me. No, the bee was coming after me.
Isn't that incredible? It just occurred to me that I'm hoping I had the video set where you could hear it. But just in case you weren't able to hear it, what I really enjoy is the whispering that happens as the girl in the background whispers to her friend about, do you see the back legs? That's where the pollen is stored, and the regulation that's happening in that space. Oops. Okay, so moving on from zooming in and how that affects regulation, I wanted to talk a little bit about safekeeping and activities that include developing terrariums and building habitats, and how this activity can focus on collaboration, teamwork, self-efficacy, anxiety relief, and problem solving. This activity that these pictures that we're seeing started, it was about a 3-week journey, maybe even longer than that, maybe a 4-week journey with this group of children, where we started out talking about, what do you want to keep safe? There's so much environmental anxiety happening in the world right now. And rightfully so. I think the recent studies show that our young people ages 16 to 25, from that age group, there's about 55 to 60% who feel like the environment is a real concern and a real source of anxiety for them. They're worried about what's going to happen in the future, and if the animals that they're seeing today are still going to be there, and if the plants that are growing today are still going to be there to give them the food that they need and things like that. So as there's changes happening in our climate and changes happening in our weather, people have to have a way to manage that anxiety, and also start thinking about ways that they can make a change for the future. And so this activity again is working really well with children, but I could see it working well with that teenage youth group, also the 16 to 25-year-olds. But we started by talking about, what do you want to keep safe? What's important to you? And the children were looking at magazines and, identifying people and plants and animals that were, important to them, that they hope will stay safe. And then we started building a terrarium as a way of saying, sometimes when we keep things safe, we can put them in human care for a while. And when they're in human care, we can help to keep them safe. On the bigger level, there are things like seed banks that we can talk about, and how, organizations are saving seeds for the future, and things like that. And from the animal perspective, talk about the saving animals from extinction and what that looks like. So this activity included us building a terrarium with the supplies that we had on hand. So we were essentially using weeds because that's what we had on hand, and digging the dirt from our wild space, and putting the dirt from our wild space into the terrarium, putting moss and some of the weeds that were growing into this terrarium, and then maintaining that terrarium over a period of time. So, we started seeing new things sprout that we didn't even know were there, and watching things grow, and feeling like we were the caretakers of this little microcosm, if only for a little while. I've brought this terrarium idea forward into the winter gardens where we are now. Again, we do use plants that are in our environment. Obviously, you wouldn't want to use endangered plants, or you wouldn't want to be taking things from a nature preserve or anything like that. But here in the garden, we have plenty of plants that are, always rejuvenating themselves, like the spider plants. And they make a really good item to use for this. And we always start this activity by taking a closer look at the animals in our care and looking in their habitats and talking about what those animals need in their homes, talking about what we need in our homes, and ways that in human care, people are keeping these animals safe, and working with these plants. And then they actually go on a scavenger hunt to find these little plastic animals that we put in there when we're working with young children. And then they're building their terrariums. And you can see the supplies down there at the bottom. I always put out a picture of what that's going to look like. This is done for birthday parties. So we do use plastic bowls that we have gotten from dollar store to keep the price down. But if it wasn't, supposed to be looking real nice, like for a birthday party, I would, really recommend using items that you can find at the thrift store, glass jars that you can find at the thrift store, or saving, mayonnaise jars and things like that. You can use any of those things to make a terrarium. Making animal habitats is just an extension of this idea. Rather than keeping it into a small terrarium that's in human care, we're bringing these habitats out into a bigger environment and inviting the animals to join us in this space. So some of the activities that we do here are lizard lounge. And notice how it really doesn't take very many supplies at all for us to do this with young children. We're really just, giving them the rocks that are in the environment and encouraging them to build something for the lizards. And this is always like, we start this by observing lizards. We spend a lot of time learning about lizards. So we're going through that whole series of connection, and then comprehension. And then this is our care aspect. What can we do to care for lizards? Well, we can make sure that we're sharing our habitats with them. And that includes, giving them what they need in their space, so that we can share the space, because we're all interdependent and need one another. The same is true, like we go through the same process when we build our toad abode, and the same process when we use the butterfly peddler. This butterfly peddler works on the concept that, butterflies are going to want some minerals in their diet. They don't just drink nectar. They also come down to mud puddles and take the minerals from those mud puddles. And so we're, really just creating a little space here for them to come do that. It's very shallow here. The sand is saturated with water, so there's no concern for drowning. And the rocks are the same way, just kind of saturated with water. And the stone allows for a place where the butterfly can, perch essentially, or, get out of the water when they want to get out of the water and rest their wings. I've also done this activity where we fancy it up a little bit. If the children that I'm working with want something kind of special, we might use colorful stones or colored sand, or those pretty black spa rocks or something like that, to attract their attention. This habitat in a box, again, works with that same idea that we're inviting animals into our space. And this one was designed after studying animal habitats and then providing natural materials. They did plant in their boxes using, little plants that they found in our space that we could take plants from that were pre-rooted, and so they planted these into their little habitat boxes. And this lizard here volunteered himself to come try out the shelter. Insect hotels are another way to make space for animals in animal habitats. Of course, what you want to be doing in your garden is maintaining stems for the native bees. And so here's a picture from Tufts University of, where all the seed heads have been deadheaded off the stems, but the stems are left up all through the winter so that they can provide the homes for native bees in the area. But an activity that relates to this is to create an insect home. And I know there's lots of different designs for these on the internet. One of the things that we tried to do to make sure that every child felt involved in the process, we used these toilet paper rolls. So each child got their own toilet paper roll that they could fill with different materials. And, it was a long process. We talked about the different materials that might work well in this space. They had to measure them, they had to break them or cut them to size before they stuffed them in there. And this cabinet was something that our teachers just found at a thrift store the side of the road. They took the glass out so that insects could come directly into those homes. And then we were able to observe that over a long period of time. Flourish, nourish, cultivate, connect is all about feeding and enriching the animals that are in our care. If you don't have animals in your care, I know some of you are involved in programs that have farms and things like that, and you do have animals in your care. But I would say if you're interested in doing this type of work, reach out to a zoo or a wildlife rehabilitation center or to a farm or a place where they do have animals in their care, because it's really a fabulous way to engage people in the process of using the things that we grow to care for other animals. It's an opportunity for us to focus on nutrition as we talk about the same needs that we have for foods and herbs and sensory engagement. And animals in human care have all of those needs as well. And so we're making this empathetic connection and then developing a way that we can care for someone else, for animals in this situation. Mangoes grow in Florida, so we have plenty of mangoes that we can always use. And in this picture, we have an elder and a young person working together on this project of muddling the mangoes and muddling the fruit with some water and with some, it's a powdered nectar that our animal care keepers provided to us. And then this mixture is fed to the lorikeets, which you saw in the first slide, that are in our care. But it could be set out for the birds in your own, backyard wild space. So one of the ways to do this is, if you're not actually creating something, you're just growing it. Growing and giving browse away. So again, these partner organizations like zoos or wildlife centers, rehabilitation centers, a lot of them really depend on organic produce, and it's really expensive to buy that from the store, and they don't have time to grow it themselves. So programs that can grow browse for animal-based programs is a great way to engage your participants and give them, a real life authentic activity that they can do. And of course, we eat that food also, so it's double duty. Some of the foods that work really well for growing browse would be pea shoots, kale, collard greens, different types of herbs like fennel, basil, mint, oregano. Those are all good. Melons are really good. We've grown watermelons and cantaloupes for the animals. I have potatoes right there because I don't recommend them. We grew the potatoes because we wanted to grow the potatoes, but as it turns out, the zoo had a little bit of a difficult time finding an animal that could eat a raw potato. Turned out the warthogs could, so they did go to those animals in a very positive way, and we got to taste them at the program too, not raw, but nevertheless. Citrus, tomatoes, and a lot of animals also don't eat avocado. So those are some things to avoid. This partnership does have to be very closely tied with the organization so that the organization is letting you know what works for them and what doesn't work for them and their animals. Bird kebabs is another fun one that we do through this program. It might just be pieces of fruit. Sometimes that's what we do with a bird kebab, but we also grow all these lovely, lovely plants like hibiscus, and the birds love hibiscus. Bougainvillea we use also, although with the bougainvillea, it can give you a rash if you get any of the thorns. So we take the very, very tip ends and I pre-cut everything so that we're not dealing with any of those thorns that could cause a rash. But the birds love the bougainvillea. And we use these willow sticks that are like a kebab stick, but they're made out of willow. Very natural, untreated, food grade, which is really important that animals in human care have food grade materials that you're using with them, and just creating these beautiful kebabs for the animals to enjoy. And then a fruit kissing ball is another project that we've done with this same program, where we've taken a piece of fruit like a dragon fruit, which again we grow at the garden, so we have access to. And mangoes work really well for this. Kiwi are a smaller item that works really well for it. And we're just going to poke holes in the fruit. It is strung onto a skewer. This is specifically like a bird skewer that you would get for a bird in human care, or a bird that was a pet. It's, doesn't have any sharp edges that they can hurt themselves on. And we're just going to poke holes in the fruit, and then we're going to poke our whatever we've grown, the herbs and the flowers, into the fruit, and then hang it up for the birds to eat. All right, I know we're short on time. I'm going to run through these super quick. The last activity set I wanted to talk about was rewilding and restoring and seeing conservation at work. And so this is where we're definitely collaborating with even bigger organizations like forest centers, or government agencies and things like that, on problem solving and collaboration projects that make a huge difference right there, in the moment. This is a sea turtle nest, and the crossvine is growing around it. You can see the sea grapes in the background. I show that because I wanted to share like the work the Naples Botanical Garden is doing right now with FGCU. They're studying the beach dune restoration. And so they have a project going on right now where they're looking at the different plants in these beach dunes and how to propagate them so that they can repopulate after hurricanes and things like that. at some level, if the organization can pair together with other organizations, you might want to work with an organization like a botanical garden or a university who's doing this type of wilding work. But you can also just what do you call that, like emulate it or simulate it on a smaller level while you're talking about these bigger activities that are happening. The Dallas Zoo and Houston Zoo, this was in 2016, were involved in reforesting the Big Thicket. And so they planted thousands and thousands of trees. And this type of work, again, directly relates to keeping safe of birds like the downy woodpecker. And a small activity that we can do in association with that would be like growing the seeds of pine trees or oaks, like pine cones or acorns. All right, I know that we're out of time with just a few minutes, so I'll just flip through these slides without a lot of conversation. Making seed balls is another way to talk about reforesting, as the clay and compost help to protect the seed, and the seed is getting ready to grow. Water monitoring projects, where we're using pH strips to test different water samples that are in our own environment. And we can talk too about how that water affects the plants that we're growing, how the water is affected by the gardening processes that we're using, like fertilizer or anything like that. And then there's lots of like citizen science projects that people can tap into. So these citizen science projects are all about collecting data and sharing them with a larger organization that is using this data to affect change or study change in the environment. So citizenscience.gov is a place that collects a lot of these projects all in one place. And you can pick a project that works for you and your organization, and it's a great activity to engage people in the scientific process while you're in your garden and growing things in the garden. The one I wanted to share particularly is the Nature's Notebook, because what it's doing right now is tracking seasonal changes, and it's all across the United States. They're looking for data to talk about, when the first bloom is coming, when the first bird is seen, and so forth and so on. Right, and finally, I just have resources there. These are resources that I've drawn on for this work and that I tend to keep up with to keep me up to date. I
Katie,
wonder if go ahead.
this is awesome. I think, Jessica, my video doesn't work, so that's why I'm just a box talking to folks. So this is such a joyful presentation, and I love all of the many little projects that you offered to all of us so that we feel like we can help our clients and others really take small steps to help with conservation and to help address some of definitely the climate change anxiety that I know is happening amongst all of us. So I'm just so grateful to you for sharing all of this with us. We have maybe 1 or 2 minutes for questions. So if any folks have questions, please put them in the chat. Jessica, I think those are only going to come to you. So would love to know if you're seeing any. And if folks are unable to ask a question, have any for Katie, she does have her email address down here on this screen. So let's see if we have any questions popping up.
I don't have any questions so far. I just wanted to share that this will be recorded and sent out to everyone soon. And if anyone needs a certificate of attendance, please email me. I put my email in the chat box.
Sarah, I saw one question come through that I might be able to address. This one is, can you recommend a good source of activities for children with disabilities? I don't know that I have one at the top of my head, but I have in the past used like a variety of different sources to draw from. And so frequently what you can do is take activities that are created for a typical environment and then adapt them for your children with disabilities. That's a lot of what I've been doing. And then there's some different activities that are focused on sensory integration and like occupational therapy, and taking some of the ideas from those sources and applying them to the garden space is a great thing. I would love to write some of these activities down that I've done with children with disabilities and share those. Just haven't gotten to that process yet. If anyone else knows of some great sources for those activities, please chime in.
That's super helpful, Katie. I think that puts us at time. So again, we're so grateful to you for presenting on this awesome topic. And thanks to everyone for taking the time to attend. We know that Fridays especially can be a little bit harried as we're trying to wrap things up for the week. So a reminder that you can subscribe to the Florida Horticulture for Health Network to get info on future webinars and also other great resources, including the Therapeutic Horticulture database, where Katie, if you would love to put some of those activities for children with disabilities, we would happily have them there. So thanks again, everyone, and have a great weekend.
Thank you, guys.